So we've got our scene here. Basically, I've just got a hand right there. There's our character. And I've created a camera that we can use to look at the hand. Now the camera is actually constrained to the hand. So if I move this around, you'll see, haha, follows along. This is just so we can more easily follow what's going on. And then one thing that can be very helpful, if ever you want to do tests like this, you might notice situations where, let's say I want to angle like this and the body starts to get in the way. Or if I want to do something like this, the body's getting in the way. I'm clipping through it when I'm doing my hand tests. One thing that can be very helpful is to do a isolate select layer. So what that does is if you select faces on your object. So for example, if I select just the faces on the hand here, like so, and I go to isolate select, that's this button right here, it'll only show those faces, which is really cool, and only in that viewport. Now, once you do that, you can go to show isolate select and then create a bookmark right here to save that selection. Now, what does that allow me to do? Well, earlier I had done the same thing on this viewport where I just selected the arm and I created a bookmark. So I can now go to isolate select, bookmarks, turn on that bookmark, and then just click the isolate select button. Now I just have an arm. And I can just look at this and I don't have to worry about the body getting in my way. It's a nice way of doing quick hand tests without doing getting all this extra stuff. Same thing with facial tests. If you just want to animate the face and you don't want to worry about the body, just select all the faces of the face of the head like that. Isolate select. You're not going to have to worry about any of the body stuff. And you're not going to accidentally move the camera and go, oh, it's a T pose. Oh, it's horribly posed. You just don't see it. It's very nice for quick tests. Okay. So, hand poses. Hand poses in general are one of the things, like I was saying earlier, that a lot of people tend to skip out on and try to do later or try to do as little of as possible. And that's really what would be the right word? A detriment to a workflow, because hand poses are very important to how people register a pose. Hand poses are actually the third most important thing that we as humans tend to look at when we look at someone. We look at the eyes, we look at the face, see what expression they have. Then we tend to look at the hands, then the body. Hand poses, in terms of what we read in a person, are more important than body poses a lot of the time. If you're missing out on the hands and you're doing the body, you're almost doing it backwards. So we want to pose out hands. We want to get really nice hand poses because they read clearly and it helps to push the pose. The other thing, like I was mentioning earlier, is that the later you do a hand pose, the harder it becomes. So if you do it in the first stages of blocking, it's kind of tedious, but it's not bad. And then you've got it for the rest of your shot, you're all good. A few tweaks here and there, no problem. But if you wait, I don't want to do it in blocking, I'll do it in blocking plus. Now you've got so many more poses that you'll need to start adjusting. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait until I'm splines. Now you've got even more poses. And you've got the spline animation. You've got all the in-betweens. The workload has skyrocketed. No, I'll wait until refining and polishing. At that point, animating this hand is going to be a tedious nightmare. It's just going to be a pain to do. And you're going to try and have to fit it into your existing animation. And when you do the hand pose, you might have to adjust the arm position. Suddenly, that quick, simple job of just pose out the hand, done, becomes a task. It becomes this big thing. And I'm speaking from experience here because I used to do that when I was a student. No one will care about the hands. I can do the hands later. Nah. It was such a waste of time. You will work much faster if you just start posing hands early. And you don't have to do beautiful, like perfectly posed and polished hands. Get it close to what you want. And then later on, you can come back and polish it and refine it. So, hand pose is very important. Now, before we go into prop posing with the hand, how do I generally pose out the hands? Well, I just look at my own hand, or I bring up reference online and look at that. And honestly, that's pretty much it. So let's think of a hand pose here. Let's do something. Let's do something unique. Let's do the rocker hand pose. That just for the heck of it. We've got that. So we're going to do this hand pose. Or actually, let's do this. We'll do this pose. The reason why is because it's a very useful hand pose. It's your character talking on the phone. It could be, if you're in like the Hawaiian Islands, it's the shaka, hang loose. If you're doing sign language, it's why. You're asking the question why? Why? This is why. So, why? Is a very useful hand pose. So let's do that. Now, when you start, I like the song. Kirby has great music. See, I'm one of those people where it's like epic song, electric guitars, drums, whatever. Okay. Kirby? Yeah. See, maybe I need to get the rocker pose in there. I've got the hair loose for I can do the whole headbang thing. We're going to do the why. Get back on track. See, this is tired brain talking here. So I'm just going to pose my hand out, or I would look online and I look at my hand. I just look at the angles of things. And I will usually start with the thumb or the index finger. That's my usual starting points. So let's start with the thumb. I look at my hand and I'm looking, okay, what's the angle of my wrist to the palm? When I do this hand pose, is my arm straight there? Is it bent? What angle is going on here? As I do that kind of naturally, my hand wants to bend. So first thing, let's just get the overall bend of the hand in place there. A little bit. Next, maybe a little bit more. So you can see I'm just kind of looking back and forth and seeing how things line up. Now the thumb. What's happening with the thumb? Well, my thumb is straight. The bones of the hand, and this is just a quick little explanation here to understand the terminology. Your bones in the palm, so right here, and this bone of the thumb right there, these are your metacarpal bones, all there. The bones that extend out of the hand, so the actual fingers and the thumb, this part of the thumb and all of this, these are your phalanges. So you've got metacarpals, phalanges. I'm going to look at the metacarpal of the thumb. What's happening with the metacarpal of the thumb? Well, as I do that, it straightens out. So straightens out there. And it creates kind of this fluid line from the arm out. You can see that. There's not like a sharp bend here. So I'm going to try and create that right there, this nice flow. The other joints, as you go out, the other joints really just bend forward and back for the most part. They don't bend in other axes. And you can see my thumb, it curls back there. So if I'm kind of going based off my hand, boop, something like that. So right there, that's approximately the thumb position. Double check. I think it goes out a little bit more. More like that. Okay. So we've got that. Let's go to the rest of the fingers, and we're just going to get them roughly in place. So we can see that the 3 middle fingers are curled in. Well, let's just do a quick adjustment. Zip, curl in. And already we're kind of there. Now, let's refine them a little bit. So when you curl in your fingers, there's a few things to keep in mind. One is that all the joints do not curve evenly. I just selected everything and curved them all together. They don't curl in evenly. So you can see that the bottom joints here are actually flat. They're not curled in like this. They're flat. So we've got that flat plane there. If we look at the knuckles, it's kind of from the back of the hand to the fingers, it's 90 degrees. And then actually a little more extreme than 90 from the top of the finger down here. So I'm just looking at the angle there, and we can start to build that in. So this was about 90 degrees. This was a little bit more. And then this finger, or sorry, whoop, don't grab through there. This joint was straight. So I'm just going through, roughing it in. So something like this. Now, notice how stiff it feels. It feels very bland. Why? Well, when you curl your fingers in, they don't curl straight. Look at how all the fingers are parallel to each other. When you curl your fingers in, they point into the center of the palm there. They actually rotate in. So I'm going to take my finger controls and start rotating them in to point right to the center of the palm there. Just a little bit. Something like this. Already that's starting to help a lot. I'm getting more separation, more visual interest. As we do this, look at the knuckles. Look at your knuckles, the very top there. They're not all even. My index finger is quite a bit higher than the others. I'm going to move that up, move this down. Now we're starting to get this curve right in there. See how that's much more appealing already? From there, I can keep adjusting the fingers, maybe bring that back in, get this angle to be pushed a little bit more in there. And really, it's just looking at your fingers, comparing, and then making adjustments. So something like that. What's the pinky doing? Well, the pinky is not straight. The pinky and ring finger, these two, share a tendon. If you try to move your index finger on its own, you can do that. If you do your middle finger on its own, you can do that. I'm not going to do that on stream because that would be very rude. But if you try to move your ring finger and your pinky finger, you can't do it. If you try to raise your ring finger here, your pinky will move along with. Same thing with your pinky. If you move that, your ring finger is going to move quite a bit with it. So what that means is when you do something like this, because your ring finger is down, your pinky is not straight. It's not up here. It's at an angle. So right here, I've broken his tendons. I've snapped the tendons in the hand. This would be more natural. And then from there, I can push the angle. So again, just look at your hand. The pinky's kind of going out just a little bit right there. The curvature is not perfectly straight. It's kind of pulled out just a little bit there, hyperextending. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. But we're still missing something. We're missing the metacarpals of the hand. The bones in your hand move as well. And you can show this by just doing this. Open your hand flat, flatten it out, and then go thumb to pinky. And look at the knuckles on your hand there. So we look at this here. Let's focus that. That line right there. If I put my pen here, you see how that's flat? And I do that. See how it separates on that far side over there? Whoop. Those bones are bending in the palm. The palm itself is compressing. So if the character is doing this, the palm is going to compress just a little bit. Now, you can animate the actual metacarpal controls, or on most rigs, there's going to be a cup control. Cup control allows you to get that metacarpal motion in there. So I'm going to add a little bit of that. I can refine it here and kind of push that outer knuckle just a little bit, or sorry, the middle knuckle a little bit more to round that out. Just a little bit, get that nice round shape in there. But we're still not done. There's one more thing we need to do. When we put our fingers together, it's very hard to have a gap between them. Try this yourself. Do a fist, and then try to put a gap between your fingers. It's very difficult. I really have to strain, and at this point, it's no longer a fist. If your fingers are closed, if I'm going to do this, there's no gap in the fingers unless I really try to separate them. They press together. If we look at our rig, gaps. Oh no. How do we fix this? Metacarpals. When you're doing that, your metacarpals are compressing together. So I just need to take my metacarpal controls and go boop, boop, a little bit, and then boop, right there. Now, no gaps. Nice compressed together. I might just need to readjust the fingers here to avoid any clipping. And there we go. We've pretty much got our hand pose. So you can see it didn't take all that long, but now we've got an interesting hand pose that feels dynamic and has this organic flow to it. And how long did it actually take us? And the beauty with hand poses when you're animating is that our hands don't move that much. When you're doing a shot, your characters aren't doing this the whole time and constantly wiggling their fingers. And hello, how are you doing? Let me think here. No, we hold a pose. It's like, hi, how's it going? And so it's 1, 2, wait, 3, aha, 4. 4 hand poses and all of that. And that's it. If I can get 4 good hand poses, I've got it all for my shot, and I can just do some simple in-betweens afterwards. So, hand poses. Very important, not really hard to do, and you literally got the reference on your fingertips for the most part, and it's not hard to look online for hand pose reference. So, that's the basics of hand posing. Let's actually add a prop to it now. So I'm going to take this hand. I'm just going to set a key. We'll keep that there just because, haha. Do you use translations to group the fingers as well? Do you mean like if I was to do something like this or like that or like that to separate them together? It'll mostly be rotations. I very rarely use translations. So let's do another hand pose here. Let me zero out the fingers. Like so. And we'll do... Let's actually key our camera as well. So if I'm going to do, let's say, this pose, which is a very nice hand pose in general, it's one of my favorite hand poses because it's very dynamic. All I would do is rotate the fingers here because our fingers spread. You can do that. So I'm going to just simply rotate them. Something like that. And I can group them and make it a little bit more visually interesting. Just like that. I very rarely translate controls because then you start getting something like this, which could definitely be interesting. If you're doing shadow puppets, I guess that would be a fun little thing you could do on your shot. It's a dog. Bark, 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 bark. What a horrible dog. So we can translate, but in most, I would say, unless you're doing something really, really cartoony, you're not going to translate them. Instead, you're going to be adjusting the metacarpals. So if I'm going to do this, so I'm going to push this hand pose here. If you pay really close attention to the hand itself, you can see the bone here adjusting. This whole bone is actually moving out ever so slightly. I don't even know if it's coming up on camera. So if I really want to push that extreme there, I would push the metacarpal there a little bit. Just a little. Something like that. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Let's give it just a little bit of an angle. So it's a little bit more dynamic. There we go. So, hand pose. Now, there was a question here. Let me actually go to that before we go into the props. So off tangent, how does Pomodoro technique work? Do you continue if you're working on an 8 to 10 hour project? Yeah, you can do it for as long as you want. Basically, Pomodoro is you work for, let's say, 20 minutes, and then after 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. You work for another 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. So you work for 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. On the fourth one, you work for 20 minutes, you take a 15-minute break. And then you repeat the cycle. So now 25, 25, 25, 20, 15. 25, 25, 25, 20, 15. So it just loops like that for as long as you want. And like you can take a break, and a longer break, an hour break or whatever whenever you want. But it's just a way of keeping track of time and making sure that you stand up and stretch. So let's see. How can I study my curves in an animation in a graph editor? So give a few references to study the curve of a graph editor. Honestly, I would just check out that video that A to the J posted. I think that goes over a bunch of the graph editor stuff. The basics of the graph editor when you're studying it is you just want to look at two things. You want to look at the angle of the curve, and you want to look at the change of direction of a curve. That's going to be the two things that you look for in the graph editor. The angle of the curve, so if it's flat, it means it's moving slowly or not moving at all. If it's perfectly flat, the steeper it gets, the faster that thing is moving. So if I see a curve on my rotate X, let's say my rotate of the elbow here, and it's flat and then it speeds up and then it's flat, steep, flat, I know that the elbow was barely moving, it moved quickly, and then it slowed down. Regardless of the attribute, whether it's translate, scale, rotate, whatever, that's it. Slow, fast, slow, or whatever it is. The next is the curve going up and then down? If that's happening, if it's changing direction, that means that there's a change of direction in whatever attribute that is. So for example, if I see my elbow curve is going up and then it changes direction, I know that that means that the elbow was rotating one way and then it changed direction right there. Now the actual up and down of the curve doesn't really relate to what the elbow is doing, because if I'm moving my elbow like this, well, let's say the curve goes up as the elbow goes up here, and then the curve goes down as the elbow goes down here. They match. Curve goes up, curve goes down. Elbow goes up, elbow goes down. Great. But what happens if I rotate my arm this way? It's the same motion, but now my curve goes up as the elbow points towards the screen. It goes down as it goes away. If I rotate my arm this way, now the curve will go up as my elbow curves in, but now it's going down. It gets very confusing when you try to orient a curve direction up and down to an actual physical direction. Don't do that. Just think of it as a reverse. Whatever direction it's going, it's just reversing. That's it. That's all. We don't need to overcomplicate it. If you want to double check what that direction is, just scrub in your timeline, see what happens, and then go, okay, that's what's happening in this moment. There you go. Those are the two things that you need for the graph editor. After that, it's just knowing how to adjust tangents. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully that video helps as well. So with that, A to the J, thanks for the reminder again. My lips are definitely taking an abuse today. They're super dry. Everyone's saving me from split lips. So let's add a prop into this situation. Yeah, chapstick. I definitely need one, like a whole just smear it on there. So let's do another hand pose here. And this time we're going to add in a prop. So I'm going to take this hand pose. I'm just going to zero everything out. Boop. There we go. So let's think of a prop. Honestly, we can just use any of the basic objects here. Let's do let's do a sphere. Just because spheres are cool. It could be a magic 8-ball. It could be a crystal globe. It could be a Kamehameha blast. Whatever it is, we can do whatever we want. We're animators. So I'm going to just rotate the hand here so we kind of have it. Where's my hand? Oh, I know. So notice here how the hand disappeared. That's because I created a new object. To bring it back, turn off isolate select. And then I want to make sure I have my object selected as well as my bookmark. And that should allow me to see everything. And let's actually isolate. So isolate select. I'm going to add selected objects right there. This just makes it so we can see everything. Oh, icosahedron? Yes. I'm glad that someone else knows the proper name for it. I hear a lot of people call it a dodecahedron. It's like, no, that's a 12-sided. So, let's take a look at this. And how do we pose this? So let's, what size do we want to make it? Let's make it a little bit bigger. Well, we'll get this right in the palm here. And from here, essentially, we just do the exact same thing. There's no other complex trick to this. It's just take your hand and ideally, actually, lucky me, I've got a bowl here. It's kind of round at the bottom. So I could do the same thing. I can put my hand here and look at how my hand is holding the bowl. There we go. So you can just take anything from your office. Like if I have a character holding something square, I could take the glasses case here. I've got my back scratcher there. If it's a small disc, I could do something like that. If ideally, just grab something that's similar and then you do that. So let's do that right here. So if I'm holding this object, it's not going to be exact because his hand is a different size than mine. The object is going to be a slightly different size. So let's go through, and index finger is pretty much straight here. And then we get a sharp bend there and very slight bend here. So you can see once again, when you're doing rotations on fingers, fingers do not rotate evenly. Very rarely are you going to grab all 3 finger joints and just go, whoop. There we go. Look at that. It's perfectly grabbing. No. As I'm holding this and I put it in my hand, and I look at my middle finger, the first joint is actually not bent that far. Now, again, this will depend on the object itself, but this joint is straighter right there. And then the second joint is bent quite a bit. The last joint actually doesn't bend that much. You'd be surprised by how little our last joints on the fingers tend to bend in a lot of poses. So we do that. Let's bring this in here. And then we're just going to get the pinky curled in as well. Okay. Now, we're just rotating this straight. That's not how hands are curled. We want to curl them in. So once again, fingers point into the center. Again, the metacarpals curl. So we're going to curl that in here. We're going to take the fingers and rotate them inwards. And let's turn off our geo selection there. Actually, I'll need that for later, so let me turn it off on the rig here. So body select off. So we're just doing this and we keep posing things out. So finger comes through and then it's going to separate out, because as you hold an object, especially like a wide object, your fingers flare out. So it flares out. Let's get that in there. Whoop. Something like this. Comes out this way, points inwards. That's honestly one of the biggest things that's going to get your hand poses to feel good, is making sure that they curve inwards. If you don't have that, hand poses just look very weird. Okay. We've got that kind of in place. Rough start. Just blocking in the main shapes there. Now, what can we do to make this even better? How can we push this even more? Well, there's a few things to look out for. One is the spacing of the fingers. Look at how all the fingers are evenly spaced right there. Everything's just space, space, space. We want to make that more dynamic. So if I hold this bowl here, maybe I try to bring my middle fingers closer together right there. Or maybe the pinky and the ring finger are closer together. We try to space things out. It's the same thing as animation. We don't want a linear spacing chart where all the spacing is just even, 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 even. We want ease in, ease out. Fingers are the same thing. We want to put a spacing chart. We want to make the spacing of the fingers dynamic and interesting to look at. So let's put the ring finger just a little closer here. Something like that. And then maybe push the index finger even further out there. So now we have narrow spacing, wider, widest. And as long as you make it dynamic, it really doesn't matter how you go about it. Let's maybe bring this in just a little bit more there. Okay. So something like that, let's say. Okay. The next thing that I look for whenever I'm posing fingers is arcs. This is one of the biggest things that can help your hand poses really come to life and just be visually more interesting. You essentially just look at the fingertips and the knuckles. So looking at the fingertips here, and it's an arc. I took a look at the knuckles, an arc. There you go. Knuckles here is an arc. There's no flat lines there. If you get a flat line, it's going to be boring. Now here, I could probably push this one just a little bit more. If I push this out here, I can exaggerate that arc right there. It's very slight, but now it's going to be even more appealing. And we've got an arc in the knuckles here as well. So there we go. We've got our hand pose. And I just did the same thing. Let's look at it from the top here. I feel like the arc here is not quite working. See how certain fingers are pressing in more than others? Very quick fix. Just doot, like that. And then doot, like that. Now we've got that arc right here on the top as well. There we go. So it's really just that. And this goes for anything that your character is holding. So let's set a key on all of this. Let's do another prop. So turn off the visibility there. Let's zero out the hand here. Okay. And make sure I zero this out as well. Set a key on all of it. Let's do another prop. So what do you guys want me to have this character hold? Should it be a cylinder, like as if he was holding a sword? Should it be a pyramid, a cube? What kind of thing would we want to do here? We could do a rectangle, a long rectangle. Crawl bar, pyramid. Okay, let's do a pyramid. We don't get to use the pyramid nearly enough. So we'll do a polygon pyramid right there. Now, how is he going to hold it? Point first? Maybe not. That would not be the wisest way to do it. So let's have him grab the pyramid, and maybe he's grabbing it from not just from the bottom as if it was a cube, but from the edge, and he's curling his finger underneath it. So let's take this pyramid and have him grab it like right there. So it's not fully supported, but he's trying to. So if you're holding it, more than likely your thumb is going to rest in the nook right here. So this is just me going through my experience of having held objects like this, as well as having posed objects like this before. We're going to hold it from here, and we're going to go through the same things. But this time, I'm just using the knowledge of everything I've done before to build out the pose. And I can try different things with my hands. If I have objects that are similar, so I have a little box here, I can see, okay, how does my finger wrap around that corner? I don't need a pyramid on my desk to match it exactly. We can now start to animate from imagination, which is not a bad thing. So the finger here, let's start with the finger. He's going to curl around there and probably going to bend at that joint and then press in here. Let's imagine this is somewhat heavy. His fingers are going to press in. So you get that pressure in there. That finger bending back. Antiki, bonjour. Ça va bien? So we're going to have that. Let's maybe nudge the hand just a little bit more forward. Just a bit. Okay. So we've got that. Let's actually go to the pinky. What's the pinky going to do? Well, the pinky is going to go out here, and it's going to wrap around the bottom. That way it's supporting it, because otherwise he would just would slip out of his hand. Now I'm also stabbing him through the hand right there. So let's adjust the rotation. When you're dealing with props, you're going to be adjusting rotations and like going back and forth with things. Totally normal. Don't feel like you have to try and get it first try. You're going to be doing a whole bunch of rotations, adjustments. Once you get it in place, then you can do a constraint, and then it's locked on. So he's holding that corner right there. Wrong joint there. Whoop. Kind of curled in there. The ring finger is going to follow along with just a little bit. And then curl in. Curl. And we get something like this. Now this is the unfortunate side effect of the way I tend to animate fingers, is I always do the index then the ring finger, because that kind of frames everything, and then I work inwards, and I almost always do the middle finger last, which means my characters really are just being rude to me a lot of the time. So I'm going to bend this here, and I'm bending it a little bit more than the index finger. The reason for this is it helps to add a little bit of that arc in there. I'm going to push this out a little bit more and push that in. So now we're building that arc. Looking at the fingertips, look at that arc right there. It's going through right here. Let's push this a little bit more here. Fingertips moving in an arc, like so. We can exaggerate the metacarpals just a little bit, help add that extra stretch in the hand as he's trying to hold on. The thumb, when you're reaching out, your thumb goes out. And you can, again, just try this. If I have to reach out and grab something, what's my thumb doing? So, take this, whoop, out a little bit. A common misconception with the thumb, let's actually mention it right here, is that the thumbnail is flat to the back of the hand. It is not. It's a 45-degree angle. So if we look at the back of the hand here, your thumbnail is not going to be like this. And let's get that thumb lined up. It's not going to line up like that. That would break your thumb. Your thumbnail tends to stick outwards. If you look at, just put your hand flat and look where your thumbnail is pointing. About 45. So we're going to push that there. And then get that pressure in the thumb right across there. Now you'll notice that I'm cutting through the objects quite a bit. This is actually by design. I want to cut through the objects. If you're trying to get a hand pose that like just barely touches and just doesn't intersect, usually that's going to look a little bit more fake than if you actually just press the geometry in slightly. You don't want to go so far that they've sliced their finger off, but just a little bit. And the reason this ends up working is because our hands are fleshy. We've got skin, and our skin presses into things. So this helps to create that illusion that the skin is actually pressing in versus just touching softly and grazing. So we get something maybe like that. Maybe that thumb, it feels a little relaxed. So I'm going to open it up even more. Bring it down further here. This is going to help just make it feel like he's getting more pressure versus his thumb being up here. So we get something like that. Now, once again, let's push the spacing. Maybe this one is going to be a gap in the middle here. Like so. There we go. Now we've got this hand holding this pyramid object. Now, look at this. See how flat that hand is right there? That's something I'm not usually a fan of, especially when you're trying to grip something. Your metacarpals tend to curl in. So I can just adjust that ever so slightly right here. I'll need to adjust the hand. But now I've got a little bit of a curve right through there. Bring those a little closer right there. Make sure everything else is working. And I think I can get away with curling the pinky just a little bit more here. Something like that. And then this one, let's not cut through quite so much there. Something a little bit more like this. There we go. Holding a pyramid. So it's really just that. Now, those links that A to the J posted, those are great references, especially the Flooby Newbie ones. Let's actually open it up and take a look here. This was one of the things that I looked at when I was starting animation, which was just these resources of hand poses. Look at all of these beautiful hand poses from the master animators. You can use these as great inspiration for making dynamic, interesting hand poses. Like, look at that. This is beautiful. You look at this and none of these poses feel like just meh, meh. The animator took time to put personality in every single hand pose. You can see when the character is more relaxed, when there's tension, when they're like more exaggerated. You can see so much of the character in the hands. Like even here, much simpler hands, but still thinking of the curve of the fingers, thinking of how dynamic the spacing can be on the fingers so they're not just paddles. We can do all sorts of things. And once again, like just take a look at reference sheets like this and try to copy the poses and use props. Look at how the hands deal with props. This can be a huge asset to you as an animator. So yeah, you really want to, and look at that. See, curves, not flat, it's curves. So yeah, hand poses are one of my favorite things to animate, honestly. If you can do good hand poses, it adds so much life to your characters and just makes your animations, it really pops when you get good hand poses. So do not underestimate the power of them. I see way too many students and honestly too many animators in general kind of put them off. Hand poses, no. Take the time for them. They are going to really help you out. So honestly, that's pretty much the demo. Like, it does, I know it probably doesn't seem like much. It's like, yeah, well, duh, of course I just pose things out. What's so special about that? But it is one of the things that I see people forget probably the most. So keep it in mind. Don't just pose, boring, done. You want to think of, how is this going to work? So let's grab it from the peak of the pyramid. Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to have the pyramid here, and he's going to try to pick it up from the peak. So this is going to be a really interesting hand pose because it's going to have this nice like pinching quality to it. So let's bring our pyramid back up here. Oop, make sure I deselect the hand there. Okay. The character is going to pinch at the peak of the pyramid here. And what angle do I want the pyramid to be? Maybe something around there. Okay, and I'll bring it closer so we don't overstretch the hand. So once again, if you have something that you can grab, do it. I don't really have a box here. So if in this case, it's really just the corner of a box. If you had a corner of a box, you could grab that. Actually, maybe I can reach over here. There's a box behind my desk that I can kind of leverage here for my purposes. So I'm just putting my hand on there, and how do I grab it? What's the finger positioning as I do this? And what I'm finding is that my fingers avoid the edges. I don't put my finger on the edge. And my index, yeah, corner of the desk as well. My desk has a rounded corner, so I can't use that really. But honestly, like, you can be creative with things. So I'm finding that when I grab it kind of naturally, my index finger separates out from the rest. And then the middle and ring finger kind of grab together. And then the pinky, because of the size of it, doesn't really do much. So let's kind of get this in place here. So as I reach, once again, just take the pose, look at it. So my index finger is close to 90 degrees. I'm not going to use this as like the be all end all. It has to be that exact angle. I'm just using it as a starting point that I can then build from. It's essentially trying to avoid having to build the hand pose from nothing and hope for the best. I give myself a nice clean starting point. So this opens up just a little bit more there. Rotation. The middle finger kind of comes in there a little bit, down, not as much as the index. And then you get this and a little strain there. The ring finger is compressed with it. And it's going to get pushed over to the side, rotates in. We get that compression in there. And you can see we're starting to get there. Let's actually get the thumb in place. So the thumb, a lot of times the thumbs end up rotating back like that to get that pressure in there. Let's get that in place here. A little higher. Might need to move the object a little bit to match what we're getting here. And then the pinky, because it's attached to the ring finger, it's going to get pulled down as well. But as I'm grabbing the box, it really doesn't do much. The corner is too small for the hand to fully grasp it. And it doesn't just curl in, it kind of stays straight here and inwards. So it kind of just curls in like that. Okay. So from here, we've got the basic hand pose. Like, this is just basic. Look at what my hand was doing. Let's keep pushing it. So first thing, master cup. I'm probably going to need a little bit more of that. Right from the start here, I'm going to round out the metacarpals here. So we get a little bit more of a round shape on the top. because the character is doing such a pinching motion, it's going to round out quite a bit. Let's move the object into place a little bit more. So this is where, okay, how much of the top do I want him to hold? Do I want to hold the very tip top? Do I want to hold kind of halfway? I can choose that. I'm going to angle it just so it's not boring and absolutely straight. So we get something like this. Like I said, my hands avoided the corners. So I'm going to make sure that the thumb doesn't rest on a corner here. Master Cup could definitely be more. Like you can push this a lot. And you can push that quite a bit there if you want. I'm going to keep it a little bit more subtle for this. So now we just go through and now we start refining the fingers. Get them to really feel like they're pressing into the object. By reversing the fingertips here, we add more pressure to the hand, which is good because it makes it feel like he's actually holding on. And it's one of those things where if you really want a character to feel like they're pressing like onto their face, onto whatever, I can press onto my face and you can see here how the hand just kind of curls in. It's just perfectly round. Try to avoid that in animation if you can. Instead, do this. When you see that bend in the fingers, especially like right there, that gets a stronger sense of pressure than this. Even though I'm pushing the same amount of force into my hand, this reads more clearly. So if I can get these fingers to have a little bend back there, I really sell the idea that he's pinching this. Curve that in there. Let's curve this in just for the sake of visual contrast right there. And let's really curl it in. And then the metacarpals, again, we don't want little gaps here and there. I'm going to try to push these together a little bit more. It's surprising how much you get to use metacarpals. Not every rig has them, so if you do have them, definitely take advantage. I believe all the AM rigs, the acting rigs, have them, which is really nice. Okay. So we've got something like that. Now, is that complete? Well, let's take a look. Do we have an arc in the fingers? Kind of. It's kind of doing this wave in here. How can I push that arc a little bit more? Can I push the arc a little bit more? It's definitely kind of curling up here. But what if I take that ring finger and just bend it a little bit more like that? Now we have a stronger arc right there. Let's look at the knuckles. Well, one thing I'm noticing is that these two fingers are very parallel to each other. So let's see if I push this in just a little bit more here. Kind of get them to press in towards each other just a little bit more. Now we've got that arc in here. We've got an arc in the knuckles there. Got an arc in the metacarpals. I think I might be able to push it just a tad more. Okay. Looking through, I'm not a fan of how that pinky is kind of tangenting with the pyramid there. So let's give it a little bit more negative space right there. Does it feel like it's curled too evenly? I think it does. I'm going to straighten out that last joint just a tiny bit and maybe bend the second joint a little bit more. So I'm trying to add this spacing difference in the joints. They should all be just curved uniformly. Okay, let's see. The fingers are curled inwards towards the center. That's good. The thumb, I feel like could have a little bit more pressure on it. So let's push that and bend that here. There we go. That's adding more pressure. Index finger as well. Like, look how straight that joint is. Let's just exaggerate this. And this is one of those things where when you're animating, try to go too far. I really push that. You can see, like, I've pushed, I already moved them up. Let's zero this out. You can see that's normal. And I pushed it up quite a bit. But let's go for it. Let's really just push that pressure in there. This is just one of the core concepts when you're animating. Try to over-exaggerate as much as you can. Go too far, then bring it back. Look at that. Now we're getting this nice dynamic shape to the hands in comparison to what we had before. Let's take that pinky and really just kind of whoop, curl it in here. Now we're starting to get a gap right there. I'm going to see if I can nudge it a little bit more closed. There we go. I feel like the thumb, like now that I've pushed the other fingers, the thumb still doesn't feel like there's enough pressure. But let's push that even more. There we go. Look at that. From where we started to this, it's much more exaggerated now. Let's see. Do you ever use translates for fixing gaps between the fingers? No. Unless I don't have metacarpals, I try not to use the translates, because if I translate the pinky, for example, what's going to happen is I get a disconnect. See how it's only the joint that's moving, not any part of the upper hand. Instead, if I use the metacarpal, I get the same basic motion, but the whole muscle on that side is connected. So what you get is this fleshy feeling to the hands where there's this strain, and you almost feel like if I do this, let's go full screen, my hands all washed out, pale vampiric skin. If I do this, see how you can see the motion in there, the tendons moving? If I do this with my wrist, you can see the tendons moving in there. I want that connected feeling. I want to feel like as the fingers are moving and flexing, we start to feel something in there. If I use translates, we miss all that. So I try not to use translates unless I really, really have to. So there we go. We've got our hand pose. And now we're grabbing the tip of the pyramid instead of the side. And now we go back to the side, and like that pose doesn't feel pushed anymore, does it? This is another thing with hand poses. Don't spend too much time on them. Like, get a good hand pose, move on, do the next hand pose, then jump back. When you jump back, you're going to see things that weren't clear before. So for example, here, I feel like I could really just push that contact here, really make it feel like he's pressing his thumb into that. And maybe I broke it out a little bit too much there with that joint. But I can push this contact. It really didn't feel like he was pressing into this here. So let's push that there a little bit more. Same thing with this finger. We can push this a lot more. Okay, let's go all out with it. So something like that. And you can see how that just makes it more dynamic looking. There's bigger angle changes. So we could do something like this. Let's push the other one up here a little bit more. So there we go. I feel like the pinky could be rotated in. You really get it pressed on the bottom there. That's better. And this doesn't mean that I failed my initial posing pass. This is normal. And this is something I want all of you to kind of get used to, is posing is not, I've done a pose, I move on, I'm never looking at that pose again. It's done. I've finished. I'm on to frame number 50 now. I can't go back to frame 1. No, your poses are never done. If you go back and you go, something's not right, change it, update it, push it to be better. That is normal. We are always going back and pushing our poses, pushing our animation. Like right here, look at the silhouette of the thumb. Is that interesting? No, it's pointing straight to camera. Is that interesting? Much more interesting. We get the silhouette of the thumb. We're getting a little bit of an angle there. Much cooler. It's totally okay to go back and start readjusting things. The only time you've failed is when you don't do it. And you just go, well, I can't change it. It's where it is. So, yeah. Push that. Same thing here. Like, we look back at this sphere and it was okay. It was a nice pose. Now I look at it, it's like, oh, compared to what I have over here, look how much more dynamic that is. How can we push that here? Let's just try to see if we can push the angles a little bit more. And sometimes you don't have to always push the angles to extremes, but we can try. We can exaggerate just a little bit more. Maybe the index finger is out a little bit more here, and we press it in just to add some variety to the hand pose. So let's do something like this. Maybe that's a little too much, but you can see how we can start to adjust things. And I highly recommend getting into that habit. It really pushes your posing and just in general makes everything better, because when you go back and then, so let's say I do a hand pose, do it quick. You get in there, move on, do something else, come back. You're going to see the things that are wrong much more quickly and easily than if you just kind of spent the same amount of time just on that hand pose, refining it. Take a step away, come back. And this also goes for animation in general. When you're posing out your character, don't get too caught up on one pose at a time. Get it roughly in place. Like, don't just throw it in and it's good enough. Like, take some time on it. You want to make sure it's okay. It's not broken. But once you've got it, move on to the next pose. Maybe do like 2 more poses. Come back to the first. How can you push it? You push it. Then you go back and do the next few poses that you had already done. And you push those. And you're going to work faster, more efficiently, and exaggerate things better if you work in a way like that. And it doesn't have to be that specific way, but you don't want to get caught in the nitpicking loop of, okay, wait, how does this hand, how can I make it better? That's a waste of time. So we want to really be smart with our time, essentially. So yeah, and now we've got a whole bunch of hand poses. The camera just spins out of control.